turned out to be incorrect. Police did see that McDaniel had indeed been to that Walmart about 5 hours after the reported sighting. He bought rope, 2 ponchos, a flash drive, and Sour Patch candy. I feel that it's also necessary to mention here that Barristers Hall apartments have cameras installed. However, they are fake. The AT&T building beside the apartments also had cameras, but they hadn't been working for around 5 years. If they had been working, they had a direct line of sight to the garbage bins where Lauren's torso had been found dumped. During the earlier search of McDaniel's apartment, police found condoms. However, when Stephen had been interviewed previously by Detective Patterson and Detective Chapman, Stephen admitted that he was a virgin and was saving himself for marriage. Stephen was being interviewed by another detective later on, Carl Fletcher. He was asking mundane questions of Daniel, things like eHarmony, where Daniel had been visiting regularly but hadn't had much luck. He hadn't met anyone. He asked Daniel about his hair. Stephen said that he just decided to grow it out. During the interview, Carl Fletcher asked Stephen about the condoms in the apartment. Stephen says that there were 4 condoms, and Fletcher asked how he got them. Stephen said that he stole 2, one from each of 2 apartments belonging to Randy and David in the Barristers Hall block where he had gone and entered without their permission, and the others were from his sister where she was living at their home near Atlanta in Lilburn. There were questions about Stephen's grooming habits. The detective asked him how often he bathed. Stephen answered that he would often bathe a couple of times a week, whenever he got sweaty, though he did say he uses deodorant. They even asked what brand of toothpaste he uses. In case you're interested, Colgate. While the detectives were taking fingernail scrapings and collecting other evidence according to the search warrant, Detective Chappell asked, "Do you think we're going to find anything with all this evidence?" Stephen said, "I don't know." He then went on to say that anything they did find would be a surprise to him. Around 5 a.m., Stephen had been interviewed for hours by different detectives, and now he had given a confession that he'd gotten the condoms from apartments in the complex without permission. He confessed that he had illegally entered the apartment somewhere between the December 26, 2008 and January 31st, 2009. It was with this that Stephen was arrested and charged with 2 counts of burglary. He admitted that he had used a master key to gain access to the apartments, and this master key gave him access to all of the apartments at Barristers Hill. Another search warrant was issued, and investigators were able to conduct another search of Stephen's apartment. They collected his knives, swords, and firearms, along with some other key pieces of evidence, including the master key for the apartments. Among that evidence was a flash drive that had belonged to Lauren and contained many of her personal photos. A pair of underwear, confirmed to have Lauren's DNA on them, was also found in McDaniel's sock drawer. Packaging from a hacksaw was also found in the apartment, but no hacksaw. Further investigation took the detectives to the laundry room, which is where they found a large sheet stained with blood in one of the washing machines, and the hacksaw, with human flesh and a blood stain on it. DNA tests later revealed that the blood was that of Lauren Giddings. The entire time, McDaniel has maintained his innocence, but on the 2nd of August 2011, police had enough evidence to charge McDaniel with Lauren Giddings' murder. They also charged him with 7 counts of sexual exploitation of children. He was jailed and he would remain there for 3 years until his trial. Prosecutors were going to be seeking the death penalty. However, during the 3 years leading up to the trial, the FBI was also investigating forensics, and they discovered deleted videos on Stephen's camera and computer of his stalking activities. There was also a substantial amount of child pornography on his computer. Stalking videos? There are some snippets online, and in particular, on the night that he murdered Lauren, McDaniel had attached his camera to a 6-foot-long wooden stick, stood beneath her second-story apartment window, lifted the camera, and was peeking into the window of his living room. There were several videos that had been filmed between 9:30 p.m. and 12:30 a.m., around 23 videos in total. You can see through the blinds, and particular attention was paid in those videos to the burglar bar that was behind Lauren's door. Forensic investigators also managed to recover photos from Stephen's camera, and this was seized during the apartment search on June 30th. The photos were from inside Lauren's apartment 18 days before her murder. His computer also gave the investigators a glimpse into his depraved mind and said that it was a clear indication of his obsession with Lauren. They were able to uncover internet history where Stephen McDaniel had been looking at Lauren's social media a lot, multiple times a day. In April 2008, he'd been looking at Lauren's Twitter account just moments after searching for nude photos of her on the internet. That same day, investigators said McDaniel had searched for 3 variations of the phrase, molest sleeping girl. The FBI reported that McDaniel spent multiple hours visiting pornography sites, a dating website, looking at advertisements for escorts, reading erotic fiction, and searching for nude photos of different celebrities. They said he also spent a significant amount of time watching movies, searching websites about guns and sex toys, and interestingly, he'd been writing blog posts on a website called Operator Chan under the screen name SOL. In May, McDaniel had typed Lauren Giddings into his search engine, and just a few days later he was looking at her Amazon wishlist. On June 7th, Stephen was searching for photos of Lauren on a photo sharing website, as well as photos of another unnamed woman on the same website. A few hours after that, he was looking at social media site LinkedIn at Lauren's profile. He then Googled her name and looked at her Facebook. Hours before he murdered her, he once again searched for and looked at Lauren's Facebook page. The FBI said that apart from searching and looking at Lauren's social media and trying to find things about her on the internet, he'd also been searching for information related to his plans for murdering Lauren. They stated that as early as May 1st, McDaniel had typed escape prison into Google. The next day, he searched choked, unconscious, how long wake up. On June 24th, there were multiple searches from McDaniel's computer with search phrases looking for information about the door-jamming burglar bar that Lauren had inside to secure her apartment. He'd been looking at that on the videos. Stephen had been pretending to be concerned for Lauren's well-being and searching for her with friends, but he knew where she was the whole time. And later on, just 4 hours before Lauren's torso had been found, he had made a search online again to find out how to erase his browsing history, obviously to cover his tracks, hide his obsession, and avoid the police. Just earlier, I was mentioning about Stephen McDaniel writing blog posts online under the SOL screen name. Apparently, this stands for Son of Liberty. He had used this Son of Liberty moniker a few times in the past. He'd written in blog posts that he had been desensitized to violence and gore, mentioning movies where people were depicted as being disemboweled and dismembered. He would also talk about drugs like chloroform and how they could be used to subdue and incapacitate someone. In a chat room in 2010, SOL described his numbness to violence as part of a discussion about a 2007 movie, The Girl Next Door. You can check out IMDb for information on that one. He wrote that the movie was one of the few films that he'd seen in the last decade that he could appreciate. He also said that that film didn't make him cringe. It was, quote, driving nails through a man's testicles, cutting off a woman's nipples with a pair of scissors, severing fingers and making a necklace out of them. None of that does anything for me, he said. It was good imagery, but it failed to resonate with me. He continued in his post, yes, I can watch a man disemboweling himself by crawling across a room while his intestines are clamped to a hook and not feel even the slightest disgust. What a treasure. There were many disturbing and graphic posts, including how he would kill religious demonstrators planning to attend the funeral of a fellow message boarder's brother. He was a fallen US soldier. He went into details about how he would slaughter the entire group and ensure that they were all dead. Then he would sit on the ground with his gun several paces away and just rock back and forward on the ground, eyes wide and blank. Sound familiar? He goes on to write that He would remain in that state for at least a day. He wouldn't talk, he wouldn't communicate. He would just have blank, unfocused stares, and that once a new stimulus was introduced, such as a family member or a photo of his brother, he would shake his head, look around in a panicked manner, and ask where he was and what was going on. Again, familiar? He did all of this after the torso of Lauren was found and whilst he was being interviewed by the police. He finishes his post by saying that he would keep the story consistent and put a sad look on. That he, quote, may end up institutionalized for a while, and they may take my guns and my ability to purchase more, but if I stick to the story, it's doubtful I'd end up in prison, end quote. Telling readers that this was all hypothetical, of course, his favorite kind of story. Stephen McDaniel, under the SOL screen name, also posted about his sister. The post had the title, My Waste of Space Sister. Glenda McDaniel, Stephen's mother, later confirmed some of the details that had been written in the post, including that McDaniel's sister suffered from neurological disorders. Then came the straw that appeared to break the camel's back. A photo that was recovered from McDaniel's camera seized during that search on June 30th. McDaniel had deleted the photo, but it was found. 18 days before the murder, Stephen had been inside Lauren's apartment, and he snapped a photo of a certificate that Lauren had received from her law school. The photo was staged in a way to include some of Lauren's personal belongings. The Peeping Tom videos were also recovered from this search, and this compelled Stephen McDaniel to finally plead guilty to Lauren's murder on April 21st, 2014. Of course, it wasn't as easy as all of that. The Giddings family had filed a wrongful death suit against Stephen, and he wanted them to drop that suit. He also wanted the burglary and child exploitation charges against him dropped. In return, he would give them a full, truthful, and verifiable confession. Three years had passed, and the entire time Stephen McDaniel had maintained that he was innocent and did not know what had happened to Lauren Giddings, his law school classmate, who had been brutally murdered and dismembered, and to date only her torso had been found. After the FBI had found damning evidence against McDaniel, including photos and videos from inside Lauren's apartment, finally McDaniel agreed to a plea. Part of his plea was that he would write a confession for Lauren's family. The full one-page document is available on our Facebook and Patreon websites for free. In his confession, he wrote that he entered Lauren's apartment at around 4:30 a.m. using a master key that he had gotten hold of. He said somehow. He was dressed in black, wearing gloves and a mask. He says he went to Lauren's bedroom and stood there watching her sleep. He says, as I took another step, the floor creaked and she awoke. She sat up in bed, saw me, and said very calmly, "Get the fuck out." He then says he leaped across the bed onto her and grabbed her around the throat. We tumbled out of the bed to the floor, and in her struggle to get away, she moved her legs and lower body under the bed, preventing her from getting away or kicking me. He kept his hands around her throat, and Lauren reached and was able to remove the mask from his face. She pulled it off, and he says Lauren said, "Stephen, please stop." He continued to strangle her, however, until she stopped moving, saying that he stayed like that for as long as 15 minutes. He wrote, I dragged her into the bathroom and placed her into the bathtub, and then I returned to my apartment. I remained in my apartment, mostly on my computer throughout the day, Sunday, June 26th. Stephen tells of going back to Lauren's apartment with the hacksaw, which was recovered in the laundry room, to dismember Lauren. He says he removed her head and her limbs, wrapping them in several black trash bags, all separately, and then took them to different dumpsters at the law school across the street from their apartment. McDaniel also told his own lawyer that he sat there and cut off every finger and bone and appendage on her hand